Some people spend their entire lives feeling like visitors in a world that seems natural to everyone else. They sit at dinner tables smiling at conversations they secretly cannot connect to. They walk through crowded streets surrounded by people and still feel emotionally invisible. Even in rooms full of friends, there is this strange sensation that they are slightly outside the experience, watching life happen instead of truly living inside it. And the painful part is, most of them never talk about it. Because how do you explain a loneliness that exists even when you're not alone? How do you explain the feeling that everyone else received some invisible instruction manual for human connection, except you? There are people who have spent years pretending they belong. They learned how to laugh at the right moments, how to mirror personalities, how to become emotionally useful. They became the listener, the calm one, the understanding one, the person who adapts to every environment so smoothly that nobody notices how disconnected they really feel inside. But what most people never realize is that constantly adapting to others can slowly erase your connection to yourself. And this is where the problem quietly begins. Because the human mind can survive many things: rejection, heartbreak, failure. But one thing it struggles to survive is emotional invisibility. The feeling that your real self has never truly been seen by anyone. Psychologists sometimes call this self-alienation. It happens when the version of you that exists inside becomes completely different from the version the world interacts with. Over time, you stop asking yourself who you really are and start asking a more dangerous question. Who do I need to become so people will keep accepting me? At first, it feels harmless. You hide certain opinions. You soften your personality. You become less emotional, less intense, less honest. You trim away pieces of yourself to fit more comfortably into different groups. But after years of doing this, something disturbing happens. You no longer know which version is real. And that creates a loneliness most people cannot explain. Because the people around you may love your personality while never actually meeting you. The strange part is that many people who feel like they don't belong are not antisocial at all. In fact, many are deeply empathetic, extremely observant, emotionally intelligent. They notice shifts in tone, hidden tension, changes in energy. Their brain constantly scans social environments, searching for emotional safety. But hyper-awareness comes with a cost. When you become too aware of people's reactions, you stop feeling free around them. Every conversation becomes performance. Every silence becomes analysis. Every interaction quietly turns into emotional calculation. You start wondering whether people actually like you or just the version of you that makes them comfortable.
And eventually, you become exhausted from carrying personalities that were never truly yours. For many people, this pattern begins in childhood. Maybe you grew up in a home where being yourself did not feel emotionally safe. Maybe love felt conditional. Maybe you learned that peace only existed when you stayed quiet, agreeable, useful, or emotionally easy to handle. So your nervous system adapted. It became skilled at reading moods, avoiding conflict, pleasing others, and shrinking parts of yourself before they could be rejected. Children who grow up this way often become adults who can understand everyone except themselves. They become emotional translators for the entire world while secretly feeling homeless inside their own identity. And almost nobody notices this, because from the outside, they seem normal, sometimes even highly successful, funny, smart, calm, social. But internally, there is always this invisible distance between them and other people. Like there is a glass wall separating them from real connection. The terrifying part is that after enough years, this disconnection starts feeling normal. You stop expecting to be understood. You stop believing anyone could fully know you. So you settle for partial connection, surface-level closeness, emotional fragments. You become everyone's safe space while quietly having nowhere safe to place yourself. And this creates one of the saddest psychological paradoxes imaginable. The people who understand others the deepest often feel understood the least. But the reason goes even deeper than childhood. Sometimes people feel like they don't belong because they experience the world differently from the people around them. Their emotional depth does not match modern culture. While everyone else rushes through noise, trends, endless distractions, and shallow conversations, they crave something slower and more meaningful. Real conversations, real emotion, real presence. But modern life rewards performance more than authenticity. So these people often feel emotionally out of sync with the world itself. Crowds drain them. Small talk exhausts them. Fake enthusiasm feels painful to sit through. And because they cannot easily connect to surface-level interaction, they begin assuming something is wrong with them. But maybe the problem is not that they are broken. Maybe they were simply never meant to build their identity around fitting in. There is a huge psychological difference between fitting in and belonging. Fitting in requires changing yourself to gain acceptance. Belonging begins the moment you stop negotiating your identity for approval. Most people spend their entire lives chasing the first one and never experience the second. And this is why some people can stand in a crowd full of acceptance and still feel completely alone. Because acceptance means nothing when it was earned through performance. Real belonging only happens when your nervous system realizes, I do not have to hide here. That sentence changes everything. Because people who never felt they belonged often live in a constant state of emotional vigilance. Their brain watches for rejection before it happens. They analyze expressions, delays in messages, changes in tone, silence, distance. They prepare for abandonment long before anything actually goes wrong. Not because they are dramatic, because somewhere in their past, belonging felt unstable. And when belonging feels unstable, the mind starts treating human connection like survival. This is why they often overthink relationships until they emotionally suffocate inside them. They fear becoming too much, too emotional, too sensitive, too intense, too honest. So they become smaller versions of themselves in order to avoid losing people. But the cruel irony is this: the more you abandon yourself to keep people, the more disconnected you feel even when they stay. Because deep down, your mind knows they are attached to the edited version of you, not the real one, and eventually the exhaustion becomes unbearable. This is usually the moment people begin isolating themselves emotionally, not because they hate others, but because pretending becomes too heavy. They disappear for days, spend more time alone, pull away from social circles, stop explaining themselves, and everyone assumes they are becoming cold. But in reality, many of them are just trying to reconnect with the parts of themselves they abandoned years ago. Because solitude changes meaning when you've spent your life performing. For some people, solitude is not loneliness, it is recovery. It is the first place they can finally stop monitoring themselves. And this is where something important begins to happen, slowly, painfully. They start hearing their real thoughts again. They begin asking questions they ignored for years. What actually makes me feel alive? Which conversations make me feel calm instead of drained? Who do I become when nobody is watching? What parts of myself have I spent my entire life apologizing for? These questions become the doorway back to themselves, and what they eventually discover is something most people never understand. Belonging is not something the world gives you first. It is something you stop taking away from yourself. The moment you stop treating your sensitivity like weakness, the moment you stop apologizing for your depth, the moment you stop forcing yourself into spaces that require self-erasure, something inside finally relaxes. And strangely enough, this is often when real connection starts appearing. Because authenticity has a psychological effect most people underestimate. It acts like a filter. The wrong people become uncomfortable around it. The right people recognize themselves inside it. One genuine connection suddenly feels more fulfilling than years of fake belonging. And those connections feel different immediately. You no longer feel pressure to entertain constantly. Silence feels safe instead of awkward. You stop rehearsing your personality. You stop scanning for approval. You stop feeling like an outsider studying human behavior from a distance. You simply exist. And for someone who spent their whole life emotionally performing, that feeling is almost shocking. But perhaps the deepest truth is this: some people were never meant to belong everywhere. Some people were designed to see life from the edges, to notice what others ignore, to question things others blindly accept, to feel deeply in a world that often rewards numbness. Their path was never about blending into crowds. It was about finding the rare spaces where they no longer needed to shrink. And until that happens, life can feel unbearably lonely. But loneliness is not proof that you are broken. Sometimes it is proof that your soul refuses to settle for connections that cost you your identity. So, if you've spent your life feeling different, disconnected, emotionally misplaced, maybe you were never failing at belonging. Maybe your mind was simply waiting for the one place where you could finally arrive without pretending. And one day, it will happen quietly. You will meet people who do not make you feel like work. People who understand your pauses, your silence, your intensity, your need for space, your strange way of seeing the world. And for the first time in your life, your nervous system will stop asking, "Who do I need to become here?" Because the answer will finally be, no one. You will just exist naturally, honestly, peacefully. And in that moment, you will realize something that changes everything. You never truly needed the whole world to understand you. You only needed a few places where your real self could breathe. If this video spoke to a part of you that you've never been able to explain, leave a comment below. Sometimes the people who feel the most alone are quietly surrounded by others who understand them more than they realize. And if you're still searching for where you belong, remember this carefully. The worst loneliness is not being alone. It is becoming a stranger to yourself just to feel accepted by others.
Thanks for watching. See you in next video.